One of my favorite filmmakers of all time is Quentin Tarantino, and he actually cites the film we're talking about today as containing his favorite on-screen death of all time in cinema. In fact, he ended up using that same death in the film Kill Bill. In Kill Bill Volume 1, there's very obviously a reference to the...
I'm going to have to go back to Kill Bill now.
Yeah. And the fun fact was, when I saw that death happening, I was not aware of its influence on Kill Bill 1. So watching it, I was like, it was almost like beat for beat, the character movements during that scene. I was like, that's Kill Bill. Oh my God, that's Kill Bill. Because I've seen the movie so many times, there's no way I can get around that. This being my first time of Tenebrae.
Tenebrae, Italian for dark, and it's definitely not a dark film.
Yeah, dark in terms of its subject matter, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know. We're going to figure it out. I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast.
I'm Kyle from GoForMovies.com. Today on Kyle and Nick on Film, Tenebrae. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and once again, I'd like to mention my friends from The Last Comic Shop, another podcast that good friends of us and good friends of shows. You can follow them on YouTube as well, and anywhere you find podcasts.
Perfect, yeah. And we want to give a special shout out to one of our patrons today, Deep Focus Review. Yeah. Thank you for being a level 2 patron. As level 2 patrons means that they also get shout outs during the episode. They get once monthly, we pick a patron who will help us pick a film that we're going to talk about, which is great because it's really tough to pick. And number 3, they also get to take part in our monthly Q&A sessions. So thank you, Deep Focus Review. You can be Deep Focus Review and be just like them and join the Patreon. The link's down in the description. Today we're talking Tenebrae.
Tenebrae! All right. It used to be called Unsane, if you can find it. There's another movie about Unsane, but let's talk about this one.
The abilities, real quick, the ability of Americans to rename movies terribly cannot be stated enough here. We talked about their last film phenomenon. Again, it's filmed here, Unsane, a.k.a. Tenebrae, which is about Peter Neal, a best-selling American author who's in Rome to promote his new work, Tenebrae. Soon after he arrives, he discovers that a serial killer is murdering people and leaving quotations from Neal's work as a calling card. Neal is contacted by detectives on the case, but he wants to solve the case himself to help the sales numbers for his book. But is Neal the final target of this serial killer, and who is committing the murders? The suspect list seems to grow with every new corpse.
Okay, this is Tenebrae, and it has one of the greatest musical scores for a horror movie that I would ever appreciate.
That's the beauty of having Argento's scores. Like, I think they're love it or hate it, really, because I can imagine there is probably a generation on the way in that's not going to enjoy the magic. But
I love it.
What's interesting is that it's my second favorite score from an Argento movie, and that doesn't mean anything less to me, because I adore Suspiria. It's one of my top 10 horror films of all time. It's one of my top 10 scores of all time. But Tenebrae is so close. It's so darn close to being as good as Suspiria that I'm not upset to anybody who say they prefer this one over that one.
It's memorizing, it's catchy, it's going to stick in your brain throughout the whole process. But I like the beginning, because the beginning is dark. I'm going to deceive you a little bit. The beginning of the movie, when he reads out the murderer reads out the book and then he throws it in the fire, it is dark. That is the dark tone, dark theme. But then everything else is color and pop, almost like candy. Even blood looks like licorice.
Well, and that is because Dario Argento used the same cinematographer from Suspiria, Luciano Tovalli, who is also famous in America for doing the cinematography for Single White Female. Did Tenebrae with Argento, and I think we get a trifecta here that's really great. We get Argento at the helm, we get Tovalli doing cinematography, and we get frequent editor Franco Fraticelli, who we both, again, from Suspiria, who also did another favorite kind of cheesy horror film of ours, The Church.
I love
back in working with Argento. This is a perfect trifecta for me, these three people working together. It's a shame that they couldn't make every film ever made.
So it's a lot of, this is definitely the Galileo genre of this, after he did a lot of supernatural films like Inferno and Suspiria. And here he wants to go back to Galileo, which his first success was Deep Red. And you have all the things that you love about Argento. You have heads going through glass. You got even though Daria Nicolodou is in this movie, almost like a supporting role. She's not as much as Phenomenon. And you have a little bit of an entangled mystery that I don't really care, but I love the ending of it. It is so like, what?
Yeah, like you mentioned with Phenomenon, I don't really care who the killer is at the end, but I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the final reveals of the film.
Yeah.
And again, like, if you followed me for any amount of time, these kinds of reveals, usually I hate. We're not going to tell you what the reveal is, because honestly, you just got to see the movie. Avoid reading about this film online because I got almost spoiled multiple times while trying to find a copy.
I'll give you a little kernel. Brian De Palma steals the ending in Raising Cain. There.
But what I think is magical about the film, like you said, with the poppiness and also the fact that he returned to giallo filmmaking after Inferno because the process of making Inferno was really frustrating and difficult, working with some of the bigger companies he worked with for that film. He was also kind of like working on the seed of an idea while he was trying to come up with the third film of his Three Mothers Witch trilogy, which was Suspiria, Inferno, and eventually The Mother of Tears. With this film, he actually was stalked by someone. There was someone who was calling him who wanted to talk about Suspiria.
When he was in LA.
Pull him apart and discuss that with him. And when he kindly said no, this person got very, I want to say on the phone, they got violent. They threatened his life and stuff like that. So you've got that kernel.
And if I remember, he did like in the movie The Murderer, whispering.
Exactly,
kind of like thing,
It's like they'd watch Black Christmas. But there's that kernel there, but then there's also the mixture of some of the things that he got picked on for by critics, which was his violence towards women. And the reason I want to point that out is, I mean, I can see the argument made, but I guess if you make films that have 90% female characters in them, they are going to be more violent towards women.
Right.
I mean, you can either praise him for using more females in his films, as opposed to males, which are predominantly used in most male films, especially as the leads, but at the same time, you will have more violence towards women. I'm not excusing it, but I'm saying that's an option, that's something I've noticed. I mean, one of his later films we talked about, Phenomena, there is violence towards both his wife at the time and his daughter. The two people appearing in the film in those roles do get violented upon.
So it's almost a little inside. I'm going to review the criticisms of my movies, but also incorporate it in my movies as well, because there's it's a little bit salacious.
Yeah.
Especially that one woman who really likes her one breast, she has to show it all the time.
Everybody's got one they like. But what's funny is the comparisons. There's some similarities here into a film that that I'm wearing the shirt for right now. The Mouth of Madness, which is about how horror authors can sometimes create a genre unto themselves. They can kind of get swept up in their own work a little bit and have that kind of interplay of like, are horror authors actually creepy people or are they normal? I mean, I've spoken with Stephen King before, and he's like one of the friendliest guys in the world. When I talk to him in public, we had a great conversation, and it's one of those things where like he likes kind of playing up the creepiness of himself, but at the same time he's a very friendly person. I've spoken to many horror authors. I've worked in the horror genre, and I'm not exactly the creepiest guy. I mean, top 10 at least, but like not exactly the creepiest guy ever. And I think there's kind of that interplay of how uncomfortable should horror authors make us in their real day-to-day persona.
So, fun fact, John Saxon's in this movie before A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is it, post? Was he in Enter the Dragon? I think he's in Enter the Dragon, yeah. Post that, but pre-Nightmare on Elm Street, he's kind of...
He's a little more fresh in this, a little more energized.
When I heard he was in the movie and I'd read the synopsis, I was like, well, he's obviously playing the detective. And I was surprised that he's the smarmy agent.
Smarmy agent, right? Who wears a hat that doesn't come off, and he's really obsessed with the hats. But it's nice because if you have a supporting character and you can't really do it with a lot of depth on him, you have to have some kind of trope, an increment, a kernel that keeps him interesting. And for some reason, his affection for this hat.
Well, I have a better trope for you that appears in it. It's John Saxon. But I like that he's in this film kind of playing against type a little bit, because he's always the hard-edged person. Whether he's the good guy or the bad guy, the detective or the criminal, he's usually hard-edged. He's so playful. He's so engaging. I was watching the Horror Geek, a show that we both kind of enjoy on YouTube, and he references the fact that he had a man crush on John Saxon. I said, I don't disagree. But yeah, he's great in the movie.
So you have a lot of things that you always see in the Dario Argento film. You got Dario Niccolodi, you got murder mystery, you got a signature weapon in here. You also have a lot of camera following the woman as she's being terrorized by supposedly the bad guy. So a lot of point of view shots and a lot of weather in it. But what really signifies this movie, what really is the signature, is this music and color, and the use of color.
And we referenced that Goblin did many of the scores for Argento's career. Now, Goblin had broken up at this point a little bit, so
I think
three of the members from Goblin came together to work on this film. And they were credited as Simonetti, Moranter, and Pignatelli. I think I'm probably butchering those names, but they were referenced as those three people, but it's pretty much Goblin all the same. What I really like about this score is that it's always there under the surface. It's a little bit more interplaced throughout the film than Phenomena was. Phenomena kind of exploded with it. whereas this film was kind of like
rightly placed meticulously, and that's a good point. This is probably the most tightly structured of Dario Argento films, and I would say he's probably most assured of himself. You know, a lot of times he's like to let's play with environments, let's play with characters, and a little more fun. Let's use this. Here, it's a little more of a tight structure, probably more tight than you ever seen of his works before or after.
Yep, it's all killer, no filler in a lot of ways. Where the film really promotes itself for being like all the meat is there for a reason. There's not a lot of fat to it. The only area where I consider maybe kind of like parts that took me a little bit away were those few flashback moments. Yeah. Where we're supposed to not know what these flashbacks are, where they came from, who's having them, or what's going on with them. We're not really supposed to know until the end of the film. What bothered me was that because of that, they seem so out of place in the film. Stylistically and substance-wise. I don't think they should have been cut, but there's maybe a better way to utilize them in the whole film. That's my one true negative of the entire film, is I felt like the flashbacks, I just don't know, there's got to be something I could have done differently if I were editing the movie, where I'd place them in to work a little bit better in the narrative, because sometimes they just happen, you're like, whoa, where are we?
So there's, in fact, even Dario, where it's kind of like a candy, almost looks like ice cream. There's some, I'm going to go back to a lot of the play of candy, and looks a lot of it. Even the phone in the movie airport is a red, looks like candy. The phone, everything, and the shoes are red shoes. But it's all very rightly structured, which is really weird for a Argento film where we're not going to play. But we get one of his most famous crane shots ever on film is in this movie. And it's, of course, let's use it, but it's...
Are you talking about the one in the apartments?
The apartments, yeah. We go up, turn the music down, but we're going down, we're going up, and then the stairwell. So he has found the right setting for this and the right pacing for it. Everything works for the crane shot. It's not necessarily like Phenomena, we're just going to use a crane shot and go up to the trees to roll credits. But here, it's emphasized, and it's a purpose for it.
What I like about it is that it's slow, methodical. I mean, there's multiple frames of the film where we're staring at brick. During that portion, because
but it almost like hits the roof. It almost hits the roof. It's like that much space with the camera.
It reminded me of a similar shot during Shock Treatment, which was the pseudo sequel to Rocky Horror Picture Show, where they do this too, where the characters are in their bedrooms and they're saying goodnight to each other, and the camera moves from bedroom to bedroom during this musical number. Kind of reminded me of that too, because there are again moments in that where you're just staring at brick while we wait to get to another window, and that's kind of on play here. And it's slow, but it's not unengaging. It doesn't disengage you from the film and bring you out of it. It's still purposeful, and it also, I would say, heightens the tension more, because we see these two women. We're assuming one is going to die at the very least. Yeah. Which one's it going to be? We're moving around. We're waiting for our answer. Yeah. They're both kind of doing those classic 80s sins that would get you killed. Drug use, sex, and especially like...
And you had to come out of the shower.
Exactly.
Always shower. 80s, for some reason, women...
It's like they punish you for bathing. Right. But then, too, I mean, this was, of course, different outside the U.S., but having a lesbian couple in a horror film would still be a big deal.
We'll automatically assume that it's going to end in disaster. Right. The other thing I want to talk about with structure, but here Dario Argento's having a lot of fun with the film and making film, and talks about explaining the end. There's a lot of reference that even at the end of filmmaking and the fun of making filmmaking, using of props and everything like that. Yeah. And I would cite this is almost Dario Argento of a tightly structured, having fun making a film, being in his own environment and making fun of himself. I would relate this almost like Marty Scorsese doing After Hours, roughly the same time.
Well, and this was the time where Argento was in an interview for this film saying he felt comfortable parodying himself a little bit, sending up some of his work. And again, when you have a film about a horror writer, a person in the horror realm being criticized by their critics, naturally you kind of can make fun of yourself a little bit. It shows that you're willing to play. That you're willing to play ball, you're willing to kind of have that discussion of your career and not think that you're holier than thou. And I think anybody who thinks that they are an artist and you can't tell me I'm wrong about anything, those are the people that I don't like, because they're not willing to have a conversation about good and bad. I like that he's willing to play with himself a little bit and have some fun with the ideas that he's put forth.
Yeah, it's even though it's a murder mystery, but it's an enjoyment of watching this, and I think everybody gets a pleasure watching it. It's all the senses. It's the musical score, it's the structure of the film, and the acting is actually sustainable. It's really good. Even the kids in the movie are good.
Well, and like we pointed out, I've said this before, I don't care who the bad person is in the movie, but this is the film that I think is most successful of Argento's catalog at making me wonder who it was. That actually brought me into the mystery a little bit more. I was wondering, I was like, could it be this person? Could it be that person? Could it have been John Saxon? Could it have been the ex-girlfriend? There's so many alternate, like, additional characters that you think the whole time could be the killer. Whereas I don't think I felt that during Phenomena. I don't think I felt that during The Cat o' Nine Tails. I didn't care who the bad person was, and it was almost like they didn't care that we didn't care. Right. This film, there's a lot of great red herrings. There's a lot of people you think could be the killer, and I really appreciate that.
Right, even the ex-wife coming to Rome and like, is it a ghostly figure? Is she real? Is it not really imagining? And it plays a part in well. Especially for a Argento film, it's a lot of circumstance. So especially that happens in Phenomena. We're just walking into a house because usually in Argento films nobody locks their doors. And here you
I'm lost.
Right. But one of the great sequences in the film is the woman stumbling onto the murderer's apartment. I'm not spoiling anything. It is part of the movie, but obviously it is part of the murders. But you have a lot of, it looks simple. The environment of his world looks simple, but here it's a taste of color, and that's why we enjoy it. Sometimes if you really like color, you're going to have to subtract color to really make the other ones pop.
Mm-hmm. And what I appreciate is that even though we get pretty steady nuggets of information and exposition throughout the film that leads us to believe that we might know who the killer is. Like, they lead us down a path from moment one where they're starting to give you clues, starting to give you mysteries. And even when we hit the place where we think we've solved it, we haven't solved everything yet. And I think that's where the film gets its... they mention Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes throughout the film, but I think it has a greater influence of Agatha Christie in that you may think you know everything, but you don't know everything. You know, you haven't unlocked the entire potential of the story. And that way it kind of is similar to the recent film Knives Out, where like you get a lot of answers early on in the film, but they aren't the answers you actually need.
No. And we talk about Galileo books from the 1930s in Italy is really the start of the evolution of American slasher movies. Mm-hmm. And not so much monsters and everything, but the gaudiness, right? The pulpiness of the slasher movies. And there came from Galileo books. Mm-hmm. And even Alfred Hitchcock knew it, and that's why Psycho was almost like a Galileo story. Mm-hmm. So even Psycho, even people cite it as the first slasher movie. Mm-hmm. And you have a lot of the evolutionary steps to get up to Tenebrae. And what I'm saying is Galileos are the starts of slasher. And of course, this is a slasher movie, but a lot of people won't regard it as a slasher movie.
Yeah, like I said, it kind of comes down to those two types of Argento movies. He makes the fairy tale, dark fantasy fairy tale stuff, and he makes the slasher movie. And occasionally they cross over like Phenomena, but like there are two subsets of his films. Yeah. And I really prefer the supernatural kind of elements, because I like the godlike quality of the whole thing. Yeah. And again, like that's the trajectory I took with this Italian kind of cinema. Was I watched Suspiria. I remember I was telling you before we started recording, I watched Suspiria for like an hour at 3 a.m. I was like almost about to sleep, but I was so interested in what was going to happen. I paused the film, went to bed, woke up, and it was still like loaded up, paused on my Roku, and I just pressed play. I didn't think about coffee. I didn't think about going to the bathroom when I woke up. I pressed play because I needed to know what happened. That trajectory through to Lamberto Bava's Demons films and those kinds of things. Like I went down a horror supernatural route with it. Maybe you started with you said this was the first film, right?
This is my first time.
So you started with the murderer ones.
Yeah. Yeah, because of my love from Brian De Palma and the introduction of somebody mentioned if you like De Palma, you definitely like Argento. So I watched this one, and then I went to Deep Red, and then eventually went to the fantasy movies. But this is kind of, you like the supernatural components, and I definitely like this genre of Dario Argento films. And especially when he gets the play of this all. This has one of the, Tarantino likes it, but it has one of the most fascinating looking murders that ever happened on film. And of course, it's almost like you know it's going to happen, but it's still like, whoa!
Which one are you referring to? Mild spoiler alert.
The one that's using Kill Bill.
Okay, that one. All right, then. Now we know. I think, and what's great about...
you can go on YouTube and find the scene, but it's not going to fit unless you watch the entire movie.
See, I was unaware, again, I hadn't watched this film before. I knew virtually nothing about it. In fact, it's an incredibly difficult movie to find. When you said you wanted to talk about it, I was like, sure, I think I actually have a copy of it. I didn't. I looked it up online to buy it, couldn't find it. The only place I could get it, Shudder. And you know what? I was like, I was gonna get Shudder later on, but I'll get Shudder now. Why not? Like, it's a tougher film to find, and it's out of print, I believe.
I know. I would definitely want to buy a print of this.
Yeah, exactly. I've been like thinking. I was like, do I really want to drop $35 online to get this thing?
But not only that, that murder scene is effective, but it's cut and edited awesome.
Oh yeah.
Because you're not seeing all of it. Obviously, she's playing the entire walls with blood, but she did. But you only see like 3 seconds of it. So they cut almost like 90% of what she did.
Yep.
But it's an effective count, right? Because that's what's edited. You film like more than what you're going to show.
Well, I think maybe that's the reason why the film is actually currently banned in Germany. It has never been released uncut in Germany.
What?
And according to their censor board, they will never release this film. That's what they've said, is they will never release this film. That was the last time I'd read about it in the early 2000s. They were quoted as saying, we're never releasing this movie, and they've kept to it. And even in the UK, it was banned until 1999 as part of their Video Nasty lineup. And I think it's for that scene more than anything, because I don't think there's a whole lot of gore to this movie outside of that scene that one would consider too far. And even that felt like scene, by today's standards, is not too far.
No, it's not, right?
You have more hardcore things on AMC. You watch The Walking Dead.
Right. You watch The Walking Dead, it's far more gratuitous.
Yeah, we get a guy's face pulled off on Walking Dead, okay?
Right,
so don't tell me that this is too hardcore.
But that's the effectiveness of it. It's silly almost. I think if you on set and you're gonna put this contraption on her, we're gonna just decorate the walls with it. It's almost like you have to laugh about it first before you do it. But the effect of it is, oh my god!
And it's maybe because the rest of the film is not nearly as graphic that when you see like something like that at the end, you're like you really get taken aback and like haunted by it. It's
even the book thief doesn't get it as well. The book thief woman doesn't get it as worse as she does, right?
Exactly. Yeah, hers is iconic, but not to like an actual level.
Right. It's almost like
it's almost
cute,
too clean.
It's almost too cute, even though she's getting murdered by it. Yeah.
When I want to talk about how this film differs from Suspiria in terms of its visuals, because it is very bright, colorful, candy popped. But there was a direction that Argento gave to Valli, who again, like I said earlier, did Suspiria as well. He gave this direction that he wanted this film to look like one of Tavalli's works if it were on a police procedural. He specifically called out police procedurals from the early 1980s as the visual aesthetic he wanted to go with. Now, if you followed me for any amount of time, you know that one of my favorite shows of all time is a show that started a few years after this, Miami Vice. And I do think this film feels like there was moments when I the train shots where I was like, this feels like Miami Vice.
A lot of the pastels.
Yep. And it's got that kind of early to mid 80s kind of police kind of thing where you're hunting down your killer. And again, that's why I think, even though I prefer the supernatural elements of Argento's work, that's why I said this is probably my second favorite of Argento's films that I've seen, right behind Suspiria, because it is the best of these kind of giallo murder mysteries.
And it's fun because it's like he's having a lot of fun. It's like the fun of making movies, but it's a tightly structured. So it's something that we never really see with Argento. He likes to do a lot of play, he likes to do long takes, cuts, and a little ridiculous. Yeah, you have a little ridiculous in this movie as well.
Yeah, definitely the tightest plot. Most tightly plotted of his films.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I prefer the dream sequence kind of stuff that he does. I like feeling like I might be high. But Tenebrae is one of those ones that the tightly plottedness of it is better than any other film. Because I've criticized, again, I think that Phenomena is probably a little too long. Even though I wouldn't suggest getting the shorter version of the film, I do think it's a little too long. I think Cat o' Nine Tails runs on a little too long. I think Jennifer, his hour-long film for Masters of Horror, is an hour too long.
See?
But again, this is the most tightly plotted, and I think there's very little fat to this story.
Yeah, because it's cut.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Have you seen Tenebrae?
Yeah, let us know in the comment section.
I know it's hard to find. Yeah.
What's your favorite Argento film? Hey, we both have Shudder because I had to get it for this thing, so I'm going to have it at least for another year. So if you've seen any films on Shudder,
I was a kid in the 80s. Of course I'm going to have
exactly. Yeah. Let us know your favorite films on Shudder. Maybe we'll talk a few of those as the month goes on.
And you know how to do that.
Yep. Check out the Patreon. Join Deep Focus Reviews and our other patrons who are part of the show, who are helping influence the films that we talk about, the themes that we talk about, getting to kind of have more fun with the Q&A section, and just kind of getting more behind the scenes stuff. I like writing little fun factoids that I didn't get to discuss in the episode. I do a lot of that stuff on the Patreon. So if you join, you can get a little bit extra content, special features, if you will. So check that out below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, Patreon, do all that good stuff. And once again, you can find all my film reviews, over 1,000, on goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find The Last Comic Shop anywhere you find podcasts and on YouTube. And I'm Nick. I'm going to go get a talk box.